What if Amelia Earhart had successfully landed in 1937 instead of vanishing over the Pacific? Her continued achievements would have inspired thousands of women to pursue aviation careers. When World War II erupted, America would have had a massive pool of trained female pilots ready for combat. Women wouldn't just be flying transport missions, they'd be dogfighting over Europe. Aircraft production would skyrocket with female engineers flooding defense factories. The war could have ended 6 to 12 months earlier with this doubled workforce. But the real change would come decades later. Women entering science and engineering fields in the 1940s instead of the 1970s. When NASA launched, female astronauts would have been there from day one. We might have reached Mars by the 1980s. One successful landing changed everything. What if Henry Ford never invented the assembly line in 1913? Ford would still be building cars by hand one at a time in his Detroit workshop. Each automobile would cost the equivalent of $200,000 today. Only millionaires could afford them, keeping cars as rare luxury toys. Cities would have grown around streetcars and walking paths instead of highways. No sprawling suburbs would exist, just dense urban centers connected by rail. When World War II arrived, mass production wouldn't exist. America couldn't build thousands of tanks and planes quickly. The war's outcome might have been completely different. Consumer culture would never emerge without cheap, mass-produced goods. The middle class as we know it simply wouldn't exist. One assembly line changed everything. What if Mount Vesuvius never erupted in 79 AD, and Pompeii survived to become the Mediterranean's greatest trade empire? This thriving port city would have grown into Rome's biggest economic rival. With its advanced harbor and strategic location, Pompeii could have controlled all Mediterranean commerce. The preserved Roman engineering techniques would have accelerated technological progress by centuries. Christianity's spread would have faced a powerful pagan stronghold, completely altering religious history. Most shocking of all, the Renaissance might have begun 500 years earlier. Continuous preservation of Roman knowledge and artifacts would have prevented the Dark Ages entirely. Modern archaeology would be studying a living Roman city, not ruins. One volcanic silence could have changed everything. What if Einstein never published his theories and remained a patent clerk forever? In 1905, Albert Einstein sat in his office in Bern, reviewing applications for new inventions. But in this timeline, his revolutionary papers on relativity never saw the light of day. Without his famous equation, nuclear weapons would never be developed. World War II drags on for decades using only conventional warfare, but the consequences run much deeper than prolonged conflict. Without understanding atomic structure, electronics never advance beyond basic circuits. No computers, no smartphones, no internet. Space travel remains impossible without grasping time dilation and gravity's true nature. Humanity stays forever trapped on Earth, never reaching the stars. Medical imaging, GPS systems, even digital cameras never exist. We remain stuck in a pre-digital world, forever wondering what lies beyond our planet. One man's silence changed everything. What if Edward Jenner never discovered vaccination in 1796? Smallpox would still be killing 3 out of every 10 people it infected. Massive pandemics would sweep across continents every few decades, wiping out entire cities. Global population would never exceed 1 billion people due to constant deadly outbreaks. International travel would be almost impossible, keeping civilizations completely isolated from each other. Ships arriving at ports would be quarantined for months, strangling global trade. Without prevention, all medical research would focus only on treating diseases after infection. The recent COVID pandemic would have killed hundreds of millions instead of millions. One missing discovery changed everything about human survival. What if Charles Darwin had died of scarlet fever in 1831, just before his voyage on the Beagle? Without his theory of evolution, medicine would still rely on the ancient 4 humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile determining all illness. Average human lifespan would remain stuck at 35 years. Biology would stay purely descriptive, just naming and cataloging species. No understanding of genetics, no antibiotics, no vaccines. Agriculture would never advance beyond medieval techniques. Crop yields would stay devastatingly low, keeping global population under 1 billion people. The concept of DNA would never be discovered. Humanity would remain completely ignorant of heredity and genetic disorders. One man's early death would trap our species in permanent scientific darkness. What if Nikola Tesla had successfully demonstrated a wireless power transmission from his Wardenclyffe Tower in 1903? On that fateful day, electricity became completely free and unlimited worldwide. Power grids, cables, and energy companies vanished overnight. The oil industry never gained power, preventing petroleum-based economies entirely. Most Middle Eastern conflicts would never have happened. Electric cars became standard by 1910, preventing climate change completely. Cities looked radically different without a single power line. Energy scarcity became an impossible concept. Humanity achieved a post-scarcity society 120 years earlier than expected. One successful experiment changed everything. What if the atomic bombs were never dropped on Japan? In November 1945, Operation Downfall began, the massive invasion of Japan. American forces stormed the beaches while Soviet troops invaded from the north. 18 months of brutal fighting followed. 1 million American soldiers died. 10 million Japanese perished in the carnage. Japan was split like Korea, with communist North Japan under Soviet control. Without witnessing nuclear devastation, world leaders saw atomic weapons as just bigger bombs. By 1950, the Cold War turned hot. Both superpowers used nuclear weapons in proxy wars across Asia and Europe. Other nations rushed to build their own arsenals, believing survival depended on nuclear capability. The 1950s and 1960s saw multiple nuclear conflicts. Cities vanished. Millions died from radiation. Restraint disappeared when destruction remained theoretical. What if William Shakespeare died of plague at age 12 in 1576? The English language would be missing 17,000 words he invented. No eyeball, no lonely, no assassination. Without Hamlet and Macbeth, psychology would have developed centuries later. These plays gave us crucial insights into human nature and mental illness. Theater would have remained simple religious performances. No complex drama, no modern acting techniques, and no sophisticated storytelling. The ripple effects would be massive. Without Shakespeare's literary influence, English would never have become the global language. Latin or French would dominate international communication instead. One boy's death would have reshaped how the entire world speaks and thinks. The power of a single mind is truly extraordinary. What if Julius Caesar had survived the Ides of March and lived to age 80? On March 15th, 44 BC, the daggers missed their mark. Caesar continued his conquests, marching into Germania and crossing into Britain. His legions planted Roman eagles from Scotland to India, creating the largest empire in history. But without his martyrdom, there would be no Augustus, no imperial structure, no Pax Romana to unite the Mediterranean world. Christianity would remain a small Jewish sect, never spreading along Roman roads. Without Roman legal systems and engineering marvels, Europe would stay trapped in feudalism for centuries. The Renaissance would never dawn. One man's survival changed everything. What if all Earth's oceans vanished overnight in 1492, just as Columbus set sail? Massive ocean floors would instantly become new continents connected by land bridges. Humans could walk from Europe to America within weeks. But without ocean currents regulating climate, coastal areas would turn into uninhabitable deserts. Former ocean floors would become frozen wastelands. Marine life would go extinct immediately, eliminating 80% of Earth's oxygen production. Breathing would become increasingly difficult as atmospheric changes accelerated. Surface temperatures would reach deadly extremes within decades. Humanity would be forced underground, creating mole-like civilizations in former ocean basins. Columbus would discover not the New World, but humanity's last refuge beneath it. What if humanity discovered immortality in 1900? Dr. Heinrich Müller, a German scientist, accidentally created a serum that stopped aging at 25. Within months, every human on Earth became biologically immortal. By 1950, the population exploded to 15 billion people. No one died of old age anymore. Massive famines swept across continents as resources vanished. The same kings and dictators who ruled in 1900 still controlled nations 50 years later. Democracy never emerged because immortal leaders never stepped down. Without death creating urgency, humans stopped taking risks entirely. Technology remained frozen at 1900 levels for centuries. The original immortals from 1900 became eternal aristocrats. They formed permanent ruling classes over newer generations. Society collapsed into rigid hierarchies that could never change. Immortality became humanity's greatest curse. What if the asteroid belt had formed into a planet twice Earth's size? Meet Phaeton, the fifth planet that never existed, but could have changed everything. This massive world would sit between Mars and Jupiter, its gravity reshaping our entire solar system. Earth's orbit would stretch dramatically, giving us 400-day years instead of 365. Each season would last over 100 days, making stable farming impossible. Humanity would remain nomadic hunters, never developing agriculture or civilization. Mars would be pulled into a frozen wasteland, completely uninhabitable. But here's the most shocking consequence. Phaeton's immense gravitational pull would make rocket launches impossible. We'd be forever trapped on Earth, unable to explore space. One extra planet would have kept us in the Stone Age. What if Earth's oxygen levels suddenly doubled from 21 to 42% in 1850? The first spark from a steam engine would create a massive explosion. Every factory would become a death trap, making the Industrial Revolution impossible. But that's just the beginning. Insects would grow to prehistoric sizes overnight. Houseflies would become as large as birds, spiders the size of dinner plates. Humans would suffer oxygen poisoning, becoming hyperactive and dangerously aggressive. Wildfires would ignite across every continent, burning for decades without stopping. No steam power, no factories, no industrial progress. Humanity would remain trapped in agriculture, fighting giant insects while the world burned. One atmospheric change would completely rewrite human civilization. What if Earth's magnetic poles had flipped permanently during the Carrington event of 1859? Every compass on the planet would suddenly point south instead of north. Ships at sea would become hopelessly lost overnight. Navigation charts built over centuries would become worthless. The age of exploration would never happen. Columbus, Magellan, and countless explorers would never reach distant lands. Maritime trade routes would remain undiscovered for generations. Indigenous civilizations across the Americas, Africa, and Asia would develop completely isolated. No diseases would spread between continents. Technologies would evolve independently in each region. Modern GPS satellites would be impossible to calibrate. Today's world map would show dozens of unique civilizations that never met. A single magnetic flip would have rewritten human history entirely. What if Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin's lunar module engine failed to restart in July 1969? They would have been stranded on the moon forever. This catastrophic failure would have ended the space race immediately. The Soviet Union would have declared victory, dominating space exploration for decades. The trauma would have killed public support for NASA completely. Space funding would have been cut by 90%. No space shuttle, no International Space Station, no Mars rovers. Without American space leadership, satellite technology would have developed 20 years later. No GPS, no weather forecasting, no global communications. Humanity would still be earthbound today. Space exploration would remain a Soviet monopoly. Private companies like SpaceX would never exist. One engine failure changed everything. What if James Watt never improved the steam engine in 1769? Without his breakthrough, humanity would remain trapped in a world of water wheels, windmills, and horsepower. The Industrial Revolution would never happen. 90% of people would still be farmers, living in small rural villages. No steam-powered factories means no mass production. Everything would still be handcrafted by medieval guilds. Transportation would rely entirely on horses and sailing ships. Global communication and trade would crawl at a snail's pace. We'd be frozen in time, living exactly like people in the 1600s. No electricity, no cars, no planes, no modern medicine. The global population would be capped under 1 billion people. One man's invention prevented humanity from remaining in the Dark Ages forever. What if the Library of Alexandria had never burned down? For 2,000 years, every scroll and manuscript remained perfectly preserved. Complete works of Aristotle, Archimedes, and thousands of lost scientists stayed intact through Roman, Byzantine, and Islamic periods. Continuous access to ancient knowledge accelerated human progress by centuries. The Dark Ages never happened. The scientific method developed by 400 AD instead of 1200 AD. Steam engines appeared in the 6th century, electricity in the 8th. Medicine advanced 1,000 years ahead of schedule. Space exploration began in the 1400s. Today, humanity would be colonizing distant star systems. Our current civilization would seem medieval compared to their technology. One library changed everything. What if Neanderthals had survived the Ice Age and lived alongside modern humans until today? 40,000 years ago, instead of going extinct, they adapted to the harsh climate changes. Their superior strength and cold resistance made them dominant across northern Europe, Asia, and the Americas. Meanwhile, modern humans controlled the warmer tropical regions around the equator, two completely different human species sharing one planet. This would have shattered any idea of universal human rights or equality. Permanent species-based hierarchies would define every society. Neanderthals focused on building durable, lasting tools, while humans prioritized quick innovation and efficiency. Today's world would be fundamentally segregated by species. Different laws, separate territories, completely isolated social systems. The unified global civilization that we know would never have existed. Two humanities forever divided. What if Leif Erikson's ships had been destroyed by storms in the year 1000, preventing Norse discovery of America? Europeans would have remained completely unaware of the New World until the 1600s. This gave Native American civilizations an additional 600 years of isolated development. The Aztec and Inca empires would have developed gunpowder, steel weapons, and ocean navigation, creating powerful indigenous empires capable of defending against European contact. Without early disease transmission, native populations would have maintained their estimated 100 million people, making European colonization completely impossible. Today, the Americas would be dominated by advanced Native American nations. European powers would be forced to trade as equals, not conquerors. 6 centuries changed everything. What if Eratosthenes died before calculating Earth's circumference in 240 BC? Humanity would have remained convinced the Earth was flat forever. Ocean exploration would be limited to coastal waters only. Sailors would refuse to venture far, terrified of falling off the edge. The age of exploration would never happen. No Columbus discovering America, no Magellan circumnavigating the globe. The Americas and Australia would remain hidden from Europeans for centuries. Indigenous civilizations would develop completely isolated from outside contact. Modern aviation would be impossible without understanding Earth's spherical nature. Satellite technology could never exist. Humanity would remain technologically stunted and globally divided. One man's death would trap our species on separate continents forever. What if the Krakatoa volcano never erupted in 1883? This single event changed everything we know about our world today. Without that deafening explosion, global temperatures never dropped by over 2 degrees. The Industrial Revolution accelerated at breakneck speed, with coal burning increasing dramatically during what should have been cooler years. Impressionist artists never witnessed those spectacular volcanic sunsets that inspired their revolutionary techniques. Modern abstract art might never have emerged without this artistic foundation. Southeast Asia lost crucial volcanic ash that fertilized their soil for generations. Poor crop yields prevented the population boom that later fueled 20th century economic development. Most shocking of all, without nature's temporary break on industrial warming, climate change would have started 50 years earlier. Our environmental crisis today would be catastrophically worse. One silent volcano changed the entire trajectory of human civilization. What if the plague-carrying fleas had died during that fateful 1347 voyage from Asia to Europe? The Black Death would never have reached European shores. Without 60% of the population dying, feudalism would have continued for centuries. Peasants would remain bound to their lord's land forever. No labor shortages meant no wage increases, no rising merchant class. The Renaissance would never happen. Europe stays trapped in medieval darkness. No artistic breakthroughs, no scientific advancement, no cultural rebirth. Overpopulation would trigger endless famines and brutal wars over resources. The Catholic Church maintains absolute power without plague-induced religious questioning. Most shocking of all, European exploration never begins. Columbus never sails. The Americas remain undiscovered by Europeans. Entire civilizations stay isolated from each other permanently. One ship full of dying fleas changes everything. The modern world as we know it simply never exists. What if Edwin Drake's famous oil well in Pennsylvania had hit nothing but dry rock in 1859? Without petroleum, the internal combustion engine would never have been invented. Transportation would remain limited to steam trains and coal-powered electric vehicles. Both world wars would have been impossible at their massive scale. Battles fought only with horse cavalry and ships moving at 1800 speeds. No plastics, synthetic fertilizers, or modern pharmaceuticals would exist. Global population would stay under 2 billion people. The green revolution that feeds today's world would never happen. Climate change would be prevented entirely. But humanity would still live in a pre-industrial agricultural society. Most people would spend their lives working as farmers. One dry well changed everything. What if Archduke Franz Ferdinand's driver had never taken that wrong turn in Sarajevo? On June 28, 1914, the car carrying Austria's heir sped past a small cafe where a Gavrilo Princip sat waiting. No gunshots, no assassination, no immediate crisis. Without this spark, the alliance system that dragged Europe into war might never have activated. The Russian Empire keeps its throne. No Bolshevik revolution means communism never spreads globally. A failed artist named Adolf Hitler remains unknown in Vienna, painting postcards for tourists. No world war means no economic collapse, no rise of extremism. The Holocaust never happens. 17 million lives aren't lost. Instead of devastating wars, the 20th century becomes defined by imperial competition and slower technological progress. The modern world as we know it simply wouldn't exist. One wrong turn changed everything.